When it comes to sheer brutality and overwhelming force, few characters embody destruction quite like Conquest and Nappa. Conquest, one of Viltrum's strongest enforcers, is a seasoned warrior with centuries of battle experience and insane levels of bloodlust. On the other side, we have Nappa, the Saiyan warlord who single-handedly devastated Earth's forces and made even the Z-Fighters tremble as he killed them one by one. Both of these powerhouses thrive on domination and violence, but how do they truly stack up? Can Conquest's durability and combat experience outmatch the sheer might of a Saiyan warrior? Or does Nappa's raw destructive power and energy projection give him the edge? Well, in today's video, we'll be answering these questions and more by going over both characters' individual stats like strength, speed, and hacks to determine who wins between these two monsters and why. To start things off, we'll be going over strength and who better to begin with than the newly introduced Conquest. However, before I go over what I believe to be the best strength meta for the Viltrumite, I would first like to debunk some common but extremely inaccurate invincible AP metas, starting off with the famous destruction of planet Viltrum. The reason I want to talk about this feat first is mostly because many fans not only believe this to be a clear-cut planetary feat, but they also believe you could calculate the planet's destruction as high as star level based on several assumptions including the planet's size and the speed at which said feat was performed. Unfortunately though, what they fail to realize is that the only reason the feat was able to be performed in the first place is due to two key factors. The first and arguably most crucial factor is Space Racer shooting the planet with his Infinity Ray, which destabilized its core. The second and more overlooked factor is that the trio essentially set the planet off like a bomb by flying through it, which knocks every single combatant in the area unconscious. These two things in combination make it clear that despite the fact that adult Viltrumites like Nolan, Thaddeus, and Mark are extremely strong, they're definitely not on the level of strength that allows them to simply fly through and destroy planets like Viltrum without prep and aid. Furthermore, despite speculation, it's outright stated in the Invincible Handbook that Viltrum is only 1.25 times larger than Earth, capping pretty much every Viltrumite including Conquest below baseline planet level. Also, before anyone brings up the solar disk meta to try and debunk pretty blatant evidence, I'd simply like to inform you that for a celestial body to block a planet's star, the biggest it has to be is slightly larger than Earth's moon, making it very illogical to assume the disk was twice the size of the sun. But if Conquest isn't planet or star level, then how strong is he? Well, this is a pretty simple answer actually, since it's made very clear in this series that Conquest is easily on par with the likes of Omni-Man. This is important because Nolan himself states that he was easily able to redirect a meteor the size of Texas. Texas, for reference, is about 801 miles long and 773 miles wide. So taking these numbers into account and assuming the asteroid was a spherical shape, this would then give our theoretical asteroid a volume of nearly 1 quintillion cubic meters, which for comparison is about 1/20th of the moon's volume. And that's not all, as the meteor is not only incredibly huge, but it would also need to be moving at speeds around 50 times the speed of sound, giving said meteor a kinetic energy equal to around 860 exatons of TNT, which is enough power to shatter Venus's GBE 2 times over, slotting Nolan and by extension Conquest in the small planet tier of strength. Moving on though, we can now talk about Nappa and his strength scaling, which is rather straightforward in comparison. The reason I say this is because in just the first chapter of DBZ, we see Raditz, whom Nappa considers weak, completely no-selling the same blast that Piccolo used to vaporize the moon, which is a near-planetary feat in terms of sheer kinetic energy output. And mind you, this was all before Piccolo would go on to train for the arrival of the Saiyans, which increased his power level tenfold. Yet he was still dominated by Nappa, easily landing the Saiyan in the planet level tier in terms of strength. With Nappa's strength scaled though, we can now move on to speed, switching back to Conquest, who is extremely hard to scale in this regard. This is due to the fact that the Invincible Handbook states Viltrumites like Omni-Man have comparable reactions to the speed they attain in flight, with Nolan's flight speed being calculated to be hundreds of millions of times faster than the speed of light. Now, if we assume all of this is true, then any character who's comparable to Nolan in speed would then logically have to be fighting at MFTL speeds to even keep up. However, what people forget is that on the same page this statement is made, the handbook also states that characters typically only reach around light speed at most in a vacuum, but usually choose not to go near this speed around planets to avoid causing irreparable harm to them, thereby implying that Viltrumites like Conquest are simply not fighting as fast as they can fly in space when fighting on a planet. Moreover, if you do some further research, you'd also understand that the only reason Viltrumites are able to travel in space at such high speeds is simply because their smart atoms allow microscopic changes in mass and acceleration that amplify speed, which then repeats those changes looping infinitely. This, combined with their automatic atomic adjustments, allows them to simulate and operate at higher speeds than they can actually attain in combat. Now that I've laid that out though, you guys may be wondering about how fast Conquest actually is in terms of combat speed, with the best answer for this in my opinion being around Mach 20 or so, based on aforementioned statements from the Invincible Handbook, giving Conquest hypersonic speeds at best while in the planet's atmosphere, and around light speed levels of movement speed while in the void of space. With Conquest speed established though, we can now switch back to Nappa and his speed scaling, which is much easier to understand than Conquest's. I say this because even characters with power levels in the hundreds like Master Roshi have the ability to produce energy blasts capable of moving at near light speeds. Therefore, Nappa, who has a power level of 4000, should at the bare minimum be able to produce blasts 40 times faster than Roshi's, and should also be able to move as fast as said blast, as power is also speed in Dragon Ball, easily landing Nappa in the FTL Plus tier when it comes to combat and reaction speed. Now that we've gone over speed though, the last thing we need to talk about is both characters' abilities. However, to save myself and you guys some time, we can essentially just gloss over this part, since both Nappa and Conquest are pretty lacking in combat applicative hacks, with the best ones for Nappa being his basic ability to manipulate energy and his Ozaru transformation that amps his power level 10 times. While Conquest, on the other hand, has extreme survivability in the form of being able to survive otherwise fatal injuries, as well as an extremely notable trait of being able to breathe in space. Outside of that, though, there's really nothing to talk about for these two when it comes to abilities, as both Saiyans and Viltrumites are basically just meant to be flying brutes that rely on sheer physical attributes and not some sort of complex technique or a plan. With the abilities wrapped up though, we can now get into the part that everybody's been waiting for, the verdict. And if you've been paying attention the whole time or watched any of my other videos, you know that basically any Saiyan versus a Viltrumite is a complete wash, as the best showing in the Invincible series is a less impressive version of a feat that even the weakest of Dragon Ball characters can pull off, making this a non-discussion even if you take speed and hacks out of the equation. Additionally, before any of you absolute morons comment about how Conquest would easily win because he could just blow up the planet and breathe in space unlike Nappa, please fucking remember that bro was able to blitz characters millions of times faster than Conquest's mum ass, making the latter scenario a completely unviable option for the Viltrumite. Which is why I think I can confidently say that Conquest versus Nappa is not even close.